Hi, welcome to the program. Today I have with me Dr. Jim Burrell, and I look forward to hearing more about you and your journey and how it can help others in their own retirement. Welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Like always, Jim, and by the way, do you prefer Dr. Jim or Jim?
Just Jim.
Jim. All right, just Jim. I like that. Just Jim. Jim, tell us about your career. I know it was in education. Can you give us some details on that?
Yeah, started out as an elementary school teacher,
Hmm.
grades 2, 4, and 5. Spent 10 years teaching at the elementary level before going on and getting my doctorate at UNLV. And then I took a position with BYU, full-time faculty.
Mhm.
Was there for about 20 years in the School of Education, teaching teachers how to teach.
Okay.
The emphasis, my specialty was in issues of diversity, multiculturalism, and urban education. How to teach diverse learners, and looking at our own perceptions and so forth, and how those create blind spots as well as possibilities. And then I retired from BYU after about 20 years and then went to UVU for 10 years and taught actually composition courses, critical writing, critical thinking.
Hmm.
I did spend a little bit of time at the University of Western Oregon teaching multiculturalism and literacy courses. And then I retired officially in 20 and 22, yeah,
2022.
2022.
So fairly recently. I'm curious,
Yeah.
after the 10 years in elementary school, and then 20 years at BYU, and you retired from BYU, could you have stayed retired financially?
No,
Okay.
because of divorce.
Oh, okay, because of divorce. All right.
Yeah, that's one of the messages that I have is that divorce takes half of everything you earn.
Right.
And and so when I retired from BYU, I was debt free and I had a healthy retirement growing.
Right.
I was set up. I mean, we were set up, but
Yeah, when you lose half your stuff, that's you notice that,
yeah,
don't you? That
yeah,
that
there was a
that
cost to divorcing, and so I had to continue to work and save, and I'm glad I did because um, my investments, I've been quite fortunate that my
right.
investments caught up and exceeded what I lost. And as far as housing, I'm I'm doing really great considering.
Okay. Well,
So
I think that's a good thing to hear that you can get divorced later in life, lose half your stuff, and still be okay in the end. I'm sure it
yeah,
wasn't
and
easy
that's
going through it.
no, and it took sacrifice, and there were a lot of months where I worried about money, and of course,
Hmm.
being single and living on my own isn't as expensive as being married when you're
Right.
feeding one versus two. But ironically, COVID did me more good during that period of time. I actually saved so much money during COVID. It was astonishing.
Why is that?
Didn't go anywhere, didn't spend
Hmm.
anything, um, wasn't driving, wasn't burning up gas.
Right.
I watched my checking account, my bank account just was nice. It was
Okay.
great.
Now, you mentioned working at BYU and then UVU. For those who don't know, those universities are maybe 10 miles apart. They're
If
fairly close,
that, uh-huh.
fairly close together. But then you
Mhm.
mentioned, was it Western Oregon?
Yep.
Did you move
Yep.
there
Moved to
first and then
Oregon.
find the job, or did you go there because of the job?
No, I went there because I'd met someone and I wanted to hang out with her.
Okay.
And while I was there, I wanted to work, and I loved it. But Western Oregon is a small school,
Hmm.
and they were changing their programs, and they just didn't have needs for adjuncts. And since I retired from BYU full time, it's been really hard to get a full time position. That was
Mm.
one thing that my dean at BYU warned me. He said, at your age, because I was 57, I think, when I left BYU.
Right.
He said, at 57 years old, he said, you're going to face age discrimination. And he's right. And so I applied for jobs all over the country. but I do think, well, there were two things going against me in academia, and one was my age, and the other was the fact that I'd been to a religious school. And
Okay.
a lot of people held a bias against that, that they were afraid that I would come with an agenda. And so it, I just ended up doing adjunct work over the last, well, since I left BYU.
All right. So had you known that in advance, do you think you would have stayed at BYU longer?
There are days I wish I had just to
Hmm.
pick up a little more, which half of it would have gone to my ex anyway.
Right. Right.
Um, no, I left BYU at the right time, and I've done well. I've been really fortunate. I've made smart decisions financially my entire life
Hmm.
for the most part, and been careful. And so, like I said, it's worked out really well. I'm not debt free. I still carry a little mortgage on the car, or I mean on the house, but
Right.
car. But but that's okay. I'm
Yeah.
I'm doing
But
I'm
if
doing
you're
okay.
doing well, though, I don't think a little mortgage debt is necessarily a bad thing. I mean,
No,
ideally, you want none of it, but a little bit is okay as long as you're living the life you want and the future looks bright.
well, and that's
You,
what I said.
yeah. You
57
mentioned,
years old. I was debt free. So
right. So what are some things that you did along the way during your career to prepare for retirement that you're glad you did?
um let me give you a little background.
Hmm.
My parents struggled financially big time. My dad had acquired epilepsy through an injury, and so he never made more than $4 an hour. So
Mm,
to say we grew up poor was not inaccurate. I mean, there were nights I went to bed hungry. So I have a little bit of appreciation for people that grow up in poverty. I grew up in poverty, and I swore I would never go through what my parents were going through as I watched
right.
them age. My mom lived on Social Security when my dad died. She had his Social Security slash disability, and I just one I made a commitment to myself. I promised myself I would never be in the position my parents were in,
Hmm.
and I haven't been. So that's the first thing I did that I'm really glad is that I made a commitment to myself that I wasn't going to live financially stupid, careless, reckless, and that I was going to do whatever I had to do to make sure that I was putting in as much as I could so that when I reached retirement, which was that way, way, way down the road,
Right.
40 plus year experience, that when I reached that, I wasn't going to be, I wasn't going to be hurting. I was going to be
Hmm.
okay. I
Hmm.
didn't need to be rich, but I wanted to feel like I could do what I wanted to do as well.
Right.
So when I started teaching, it was really tough because I began teaching. They paid my salary was 800, excuse me, 1,200 a month. That was
Hmm.
my starting teaching salary. And I had two little kids. I had a house payment. It was really ironic because on the teacher salary that I had, and this, we're talking somebody with a graduating from a college bachelor's degree.
Right.
I qualified for WIC, heat assistance, all of these things, and that is a full-time employee with a college degree.
Mm.
So another thing I had to do was work multiple jobs. So that was another thing is that I commit to myself that I wasn't going to fail to prepare. You got to commit that you're not going to fail to prepare. And then the
Hmm.
second thing, that means you got to actually do what you have to do then to make that happen. So in my 10 years as an elementary teacher, I I worked anywhere from 3 to 5 part-time jobs, everything from landscaping, lawn care,
Hmm.
to selling insurance and investments, to selling ladies' shoes at Baker's Shoes, and whatever I had to do to pick up some bucks, including during the summer. The other thing that I did was that I drove cheap cars. I
Hmm.
tried to give my wife, the mother of my children, I tried to make sure that she had the nicer car, a good car, a reliable car, and I'd pick up $1,500 cars and drive them into the ground, which back then you could pick up a
Right.
nice Mercury Marquis for 1,500 and drive it for 3 years and get another one.
Right.
So multiple jobs. And then another thing was that because I was a teacher, I began to build a pension for retirement. I feel really bad for people these days that even in the teaching profession, they've changed that structure. But at
Right.
the time, it was like 2% for every year you taught. So I made sure that I took advantage of the pension program.
Hmm.
Boy, if I was to tell anybody today to do anything, it would be to either pick a career with that guarantee, good pensions that you can kind of count on,
Right.
because you can't always count on pensions, and then to save, of course. So
Yeah. Let me just clarify for the listeners, just in case not sure what a pension is, because they are more and more rare. A pension, like you mentioned, 2%, you often will get 2%
yeah,
per year that you teach or work there. And they might have a minimum of 20 years or so that you have to be there that long. So in that case, you get
yeah,
40% of your income for life. If you do, 35 years, you might get 70% of your income
70.
for the rest of your
Yeah,
life, plus whatever you get from Social Security and plus whatever you might have in 401ks or IRAs. So
oh yeah,
I work with a lot of retired professors and teachers, and they're usually doing quite well financially. They have a lot of stability because of that pension. And it's harder, if you tell me, Martin, I'd like you to give me $50,000 a year for the rest of my life, I'd probably say, well, give me $1,000,000. And we could reasonably expect to, draw out 5% per year. And that's a very general guideline. Don't hold me to it. But yeah, your $50,000 a year pension is worth about $1,000,000, more or less. So
yeah.
they had that right. You don't have to do anything. You just have to just work, right, and get your tenure.
As as I often tell people, once you get retired, once you've earned it, you
Yeah.
just got to wake up to get it.
That's
Keep
right.
waking up.
So were personal finances something that you kind of thought about, daily and weekly or monthly all the time, or was it you're just so focused on work and things kind of happened to your favor?
Constantly, constantly. See,
Okay.
that's another thing that I think that my ex and I did right. I got divorced, but
Right.
is that I knew that I was not raised by people that were money smart.
Hmm.
And I wasn't around money. I was around poverty, and I was around debt, and I was around want and deficit thinking.
Hmm.
And so I told my then wife that we need to we need to take classes, we need to read books, we need to educate ourselves on how money works, how investments work, what's a good investment, how do you
Hmm.
know what decisions, and again, we were making decisions based on what was available at the time. I
Right.
think 401ks were relatively new. I don't think they'd instituted Roths yet. I don't think.
That was, I
And
believe, in the early 90s,
yeah,
the
I
early
think,
to mid 90s, Roth IRAs came into
yeah.
existence.
And I started teaching in 81. So I don't
Right.
think, yeah, Roths came later. So it was mostly, I wanted to know sound financial principles because nobody modeled them for me. Nobody
Hmm.
taught me those things.
Okay.
So we
You
read
know,
everything from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, whatever it
right.
was.
Yeah. So, there are many people who would look at your situation and say those are excuses for being a financial failure. So you grew up in poverty, you had no good example, and someone say, well, that's why I'm poor. And then you're a school teacher making $1,200 a month, and someone say, well, that's why I'm poor, had no money. And yet you overcame both of those. You didn't use them as excuses, but rather as almost like an impetus to do better. And
Yeah,
then you did what it takes, the education part, the being informed, learning as you go, I imagine, and also the extra jobs you did. So you really
yeah.
did take control. I wrote a poem called "The Power of Plan," which I've quoted another podcast. I won't repeat the whole thing right now, but there's a line there that I write: "People go through life dealing with their stuff. They hope that in the end they'll somehow have enough." And that is not a recipe for success. You got to take control. Are there some things that you maybe wish you had done better looking back?
Well, as I said, I got divorced later in life, and that was a catastrophe to my savings and my plan. It shattered the plan because I was 57 years old when I
Oh,
retired from BYU, and financially debt-free and doing really well. So I didn't account for divorce in it. So I would say that that came a little bit later.
Hmm.
It's a hard thing to say. Do I regret being divorced? I regret losing half my stuff, but I don't regret the divorce.
Okay.
You know, it's hard, and you know, it's hard on all of us, but that's another topic. I think as I look back on the decisions, I always try to minimize debt. I hate debt.
Hmm.
I think debt is a demon that follows you around all day long and keeps you awake in your sleep. And so my ex and I used to fight about, and I mean fight, we would fight about expenditures. Like every year, I would increase my pension at BYU
Hmm.
by 1%. And they had a matching, you know, put in 6, they'll match at 3. That was a 50% increase right off. I
Right.
mean, you'd have to be a complete idiot not to put 6% in when they're going to give you a 50% right to begin with. And so eventually, I just every year I'd get a raise from BYU, and then I would increase it by 1%.
Hmm.
And over time, I watched that fund beginning to grow too, which was really nice. Um, so I'm glad that I did that. And I guess that's another message, is that she would say to me, my ex would say to me, we can't afford this. We can't afford this. And my response was, we can't afford not to.
Right.
Because I said, the day's going to come when we hit retirement. And if there's anything that I'm sure of, it's that for most of us, you can never have enough money at retirement. For most of us, you just can't have enough.
Right.
And so you worry about it and you're careful. And how lucky are those that, you know, have income flows that are more than they could spend. I mean, it must be really nice not to have to worry about that. And a lot of people don't, but more people do.
Hmm.
So she would say, we can't afford it. And I would hold the line and I would say, we just can't afford to ignore this.
Right.
So
Well,
it
then
was
what you're
great.
doing is you're basically you're robbing your future self of that money that your future self
Yeah.
would have had you saved it.
Yeah. And so, and it's not just saving. The thing about retirement that I've come to really understand, we were talking about, you and I earlier, is that
Hmm.
it's how you live your whole life.
Hmm.
It's what kind of house are you in? Did you overbuy? I mean, these people today starting out that are buying starter homes in the 500 range. Wow. A
Right.
starter home for me was $35,000.
Yeah.
Now, somebody listening to this can roll their eyes, but they don't realize that that $35,000 was probably as hard for me to make that payment at the wage I was making at the time as what they're feeling. And the same things that I did to be successful, they're going to have to do too. So
Right.
it doesn't really matter the numbers. What really matters is what's your commitments, what's your willingness to sacrifice, to work,
Hmm.
to do the things that will land you in a place at 65 or 67, whatever you retire at, that
Yeah.
that'll get
Now,
you there.
and you mentioned, okay, teaching for 10 years elementary and then getting your PhD. I'm pretty sure they didn't just hand you that PhD, but you had to work for it.
Yeah, I went
And
to UNLV for 3 years and
yeah. And then
worked very hard.
that's what opened the door for you at BYU, and pretty good retirement program there and a good pension and 401k. Had you not done the work to get the PhD, then yeah, that door would have been closed to you. So you created that opportunity with sacrifice and work. And that still holds
And
true
it
today.
was, yeah, and it was sacrifice. And even when I started at BYU back in 90, I think it was
Okay.
fall of 90 or 91. No, 93. It was
Okay.
93. Um, I only started as with a PhD, a master's, and a bachelor, and 10
Hmm.
years of teaching experience. I only started at 42,000,
Wow.
which was not great income. And so I was picking up every extra class and any extra money that I could, writing grants. to keep
Mhm.
beefing that up because life was getting more expensive. I laugh about that now because
Right.
I'd like to pay
Yeah.
what I paid back
Let,
then.
let me ask you this. Now, I want to shift more to your experience in retirement in a moment. But before we get to that, you've mentioned several times, okay, getting your PhD, the second, third, fourth job. So you were working very hard. Were you able to still, though, have fun and kind of enjoy life along the way during those years?
Uh,
Or was it just so focused on money you were? So some might say
Raising kids got
it's
more.
not worth it. That's what I'm trying to get. Somebody say, "Oh, that's just too much
Yeah, it
work.
was
You have
worth
to
it.
enjoy life."
Life was expensive as the kids got a little older into their teenage year. Every year,
Right.
raising kids got more expensive. And every year, and my wife at the time, we'd made a commitment that she was going to be a stay-at-home mom.
Hmm.
And so I was the lone income earner, and that put so much stress and pressure on me to be a
Right.
single income. And
Yeah.
that was stressful. And there's a great quote I heard once that said that somebody could throw it out the door faster with a spoon than someone can throw it in the door with a shovel.
Mm.
And so it just seemed like at the time I could never bring enough in as fast as it went out.
Right.
And so I was working probably 100-hour weeks at BYU. I took on and created opportunities because I'm a bit of an entrepreneur. Um, I created opportunities to earn extra income, and that put me at odds with the university because they sat me down, didn't like my entrepreneurial spirit. They thought I
Ah.
was too much about money. And I said to my dean when he called me in one day to tell me that I was doing too much, I said, well, I don't get paid enough. I don't get paid
Right.
enough. And I said, what am I supposed to tell my wife? And he says, tell her to live on less.
Mm.
And I said, you tell her.
That's right. Wow.
So, yeah, it was during those years, it was stressful. It was expensive. There was never enough money. And I was trying to carry on with church work, academic responsibilities, publishing,
Hmm.
writing, running programs that I had developed. Um, so much going on. And really, I mean, my ex was right at the time. We certainly could have used that 1% I was putting away every month
Hmm.
more, but I didn't care. It didn't matter that, if it pinched a little bit more, it didn't matter.
Okay.
Bump that up,
So
because sooner or later you're going to hit that.
let's now shift a little more towards retirement. And I'll start by asking, I want to ask you how retirement is the way you envisioned it. And I also want to get your response to, well, are you the same way, kind of really pinching pennies and watching money carefully now, or are you just able to enjoy life more and you have less financial stress now that you're retired?
Um, I hit retirement. Life is life is full of surprises.
Yes.
And when I went to my 49th high school reunion, I just asked everybody there, did life go the way you thought it was going to go? And they
Hmm.
all laughed. And that's the old saying, you make your plans or whatever.
No, as
And
John Lennon said, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. Is
yeah,
that what you're
and
referring to?
yep. And so you make your plans and you adapt, you pivot, but you keep doing the same things that are working. You don't, if it's working, if it's not
Hmm.
broken, you don't fix it. So um, even when I left BYU at 57 years old, I still held on to the commitment to save money. My goal was to keep my checking account as a single man,
Hmm.
was to keep building my checking account up by, watching what I eat, watching what I spend, driving affordable cars and all of that. And even still now at retirement, I still watch my checking account because I
Hmm.
want to maintain a certain level of money in my checking account,
Right.
in my CDs. I'm very careful now about, I mean, I just bought a car, brand new
Hmm.
car this last weekend. and paid more for it than I ever imagined paying for a car.
As much as you paid for your first house, or maybe close to that.
More than my, yeah, more
More,
than my
more
first
than your
2 or
first
3
house.
houses.
I joke about that, but you're living proof that you ask someone who's, maybe whatever, beyond age 65 or 70, say, what costs more, your first house, your last car? And there's a good chance they might say their most recent car costs more than their first house.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not kidding when I say that that car was more expensive than my first 3
Mm-hmm.
houses.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So how was retirement the way you envisioned it?
um, the first year of retirement was, it was awful. It
Mm,
was awful. I thought it would be okay. I thought, I was still teaching adjunct courses at UVU, and I thought I would teach forever. I just thought I
mm,
would teach till they threw me out because I was too
right.
old. But made the decision to move down here to St. George where I live. And that, of course, made working at UVU
Right.
improbable, unless I wanted to teach online, which I didn't want to do. I'm more face to face, brick and mortar. And so the first year of retirement, I felt completely lost. I
Mm,
felt totally lost. I didn't know what to do with myself. Um, I spent an awful lot of time just journaling and finding places where I could just relax, like a park or
mhm.
or somewhere. One of my favorite places to go at the time was, I think it's called Huntington. There's a park up there, and I would go sit amongst the pines
Right.
and just journal. And then, of course, I had to wrestle. Do I move down here? Do I stay up there? More big life changes.
Mhm.
Um, where do I find my friends? Where are my people? Where's my community? Um, yeah, the first year of retirement was much harder, and I was yeah, I was.
And was there anything you think you could have done to prepare for that, or that's just the way it had to happen? You had to kind of learn by going through it.
When you live in your head all the time,
Which we all do.
yeah, when all of a sudden you got absolutely no demands on you,
Hmm.
nowhere to go, nothing to do, and that head starts going at 3 in the morning, or you get up and have a cup of coffee first thing, and man, you spend the rest of the day going, what could I be doing?
Hmm.
And the other thing is you become so much more aware of your mortality and the time that you have left, and you ask yourself, is this how I want to spend that time?
Right.
And so now I wasn't struggling financially. I had enough money. I did have my house down here that I occasionally stayed in. I didn't live here yet full time. Um, all of a sudden it was like, who am I now? And how
Hmm.
do I become relevant to a much smaller world? Because now that I'm down here full time, I mean, I used to, my relevance, my impact, my footprint, if you will, used to be for hundreds of students a year,
Right.
faculty, years, teachers, people all over the country that I'd interact with. And now my day is, I'm on the HOA board.
Hmm.
And so
So that
a
makes you
neighbor,
popular, I'm sure.
yeah, a neighbor calls and says, I've got a lizard in my house. Can you come help me catch it?
Hmm.
So
You know,
I'm
I
on the ground
Jim,
catching
I'm
lizards in the
currently
house.
writing a new manual, and it's called the Happy Retirement Handbook, a step-by-step
Yeah,
guide to maximize your golden years. And one of the steps in there is to maintain a sense of purpose. And for most of us, our purpose does come from our work. And yes, of
yeah,
course, family, and there's other things as well, but we spend so much more of our working, or sorry, our daytime hours working. It is a part of who we are. That's why I may never
yeah,
stop working. I love what I do. So yeah, I think having something to replace that purpose you got from your career is an important thing we need to
yeah.
consider, hopefully even before we get to retirement. So we retire to something, not from something. And that could be
Well, and
volunteer work, it could be a part-time job, it could be entrepreneurship. You could mentor younger people. I did see some study. I became a certified retirement counselor about 4 or 5 years ago, and they said that those who mentor young entrepreneurs, those entrepreneurs have a far higher success rate. So it's good for the young people, and it's good for the seasoned people, the veterans who have, yeah, that again sense of purpose, and they got a reason to get up in the morning and look forward to things.
Yeah. And that's so true, because I sat down here before I moved down here full time. I used to just come down to get out of the snow and
Right.
hang out. And I knew one day I wanted to move down here full time. I just didn't know how it would play out. But I used to sit here and ask myself, who am I apart
Hmm.
from my career? Who's Jim Burrell? And who is he really? And what does he bring now? What does he have to contribute now? And I mean, it's really been a challenge. That's been one of the hardest things about retirement, is to learn how to fill my days in such a way that at the end of the day, I lay my head on the pillow and go, this was a good day.
Right. And is that something you're still working on, or have you
Every
got it?
day,
Okay. So still not quite
every day.
figured out all the way yet, huh? It's still something that's you grapple with.
I guess I envy those who, they stayed with the same life partner. They've got their grandkids with them,
Hmm.
and their lives still center around their religious beliefs and practices and their family rituals and yada yada. So all retirement did was enhance all of that. But for those
Hmm.
of us that went through significant life changes and so forth, the question of who am I and what is this world and life really about now?
Right.
Um, yeah, that that almost becomes, I guess something that you figure out every day now.
Hmm.
When
Yeah.
it when it's not given to you as a program and it's scripted and this is what you're supposed to do, when you're suddenly you can do it anything you want.
Now it's up to you. Yeah. You could sleep in
Yeah.
till 2 p.m. or wake up at the crack of noon, as I like to joke sometimes. Right. You
Yeah. And
know,
so I had to get in touch with some core values and say, who am I and how can that play out best now?
right. Part of my program I'm writing about this happiness in retirement is to prepare well for your death. And part of
Yeah.
that could entail, well, you may have heard this before, writing your obituary. Like what do you want people to say about you at your funeral? And as you have that conversation with yourself through journaling or however you do it, or maybe with someone else, then some of these values may begin to emerge. Okay, this is actually, I want to be known for this, that I worked at the animal shelter, if that's important to you, or I gave to this charity, or whatever it might be, or I learned how to play guitar. There's I can't think of her name. I think it was Louise something. Louise Hayes, maybe is her name. I heard her story that she retired at 67 and she started a publishing company at age 67 and ran until she died, I think in her late 80s or early 90s. And she's got some, marvelous books in her publishing company. Maybe you've heard of her before, but
Yeah.
she didn't start till, yeah, very late in her life. And I think it probably kept her young and gave her that sense of purpose.
Look at Brene Brown. There's another one that
Yeah,
gave one talk and lit everything up,
right. Yeah. And
changed their life.
yep. So, what advice would you give someone who, let's say, is maybe 5 or 10 years away? Hopefully, the kids are gone or almost gone out of the house, and it's really just kind of them. Maybe their spouse, if they're still married. And I would prefer that. And obviously, divorce is necessary sometimes, so no judgment there. But yeah, someone's 5 or 10 years away from that last day at work. What would you tell them to be thinking about and doing to prepare?
Honestly, if I had to sit down with someone at 55 years old that was thinking of retiring at 65 and they had a
Mhm.
plan in place, I would just tell them, don't think about 65 years old. Be in the moment, live in the day, and make sure that at the end of this day, you go, it was a good day.
Mm,
And if you
right,
can live 98% of your days putting your head on your pillow and going, this was a good day, even if there was hard stuff, even if there were challenges, everything's okay, it was good. Um, then when you reach that 65-year-old day, you'll say, this day will be good too. And whatever comes tomorrow, it'll be okay. We'll do good.
I like that's a great attitude. So if I understand, you're saying have the plan in place to retire at 65, but then really don't dwell on that. Just focus on the
Yeah.
day, live in the moment, and appreciate the moment. That's
Yeah, because uh, if you're lucky enough to live to retirement, if you're lucky enough to
mhm,
live to be old, and that is a gift because not
right.
everybody does, then you want to make sure that you slow down long enough, at least once during a day, to at least smell the roses or smell the flowers, as they say, or
Hmm.
look at the sunshine or listen to a favorite song,
Right.
just to stay in touch with yourself.
I think that's very important. Not only will you enjoy it, but then I think you will approach life's challenges with a sense of more vigor. You might see things a little differently, and you'll actually have better solutions and better overcome whatever life throws at you if you do take the time just to take a little time out and yet enjoy the moment. Absolutely.
And I would add to that, because these are things that I did and I'm glad I did. Um, I really worked hard on me. I got, you know, help with dealing with my childhood, help in dealing with why I divorced, help in, you
Hmm.
know, going through some transitions about some things in life that I once thought were important and true, and now I see differently.
Right.
And when you reach a point where in life your experiences don't match other people's explanations, and you now need to go, okay, well, what does that mean today?
Hmm.
I really spent the time getting to know myself and working on myself. And I can say honestly, without hesitation, that I'm the best me I've ever been, and I like me. I like me better than I've ever liked me.
Mm.
And that helps because when you're busy and preoccupied with work and the demands and people, you don't have time to sit in your own juices all day long.
Hmm.
And so now I spend all day long with me. And there have been many days where the only person I talked to all day was myself.
Right.
And I literally talked out loud.
So it's important to learn to like yourself then if you're going to spend a lot of time with yourself.
I don't care how much money you saved. I don't care what your fame was. If you hit retirement, you can't look in the mirror and go, I'm glad I'm him or her. Um, Retirement will suck just as much as your life before retirement sucked,
Wow.
and for the same reasons.
Jim, I think that is extremely valuable information, very insightful. That's great. I've enjoyed this time with you today, and I think the listeners will really enjoy hearing your story, and they have a lot to learn from you. And thank you very much for being part of this program here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed the conversation. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well, Jim. All right, take care.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed the interview and learned something that you can use in your own retirement. If you've been retired for more than 1 year and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast to share your story, please visit storiesofretirement.com. If you have a question about retirement, or maybe you're not even sure where to begin, I offer all of my listeners a 1-hour consultation at no charge. Whether by phone, video call, or right here in my Orem office, I'll do my best to answer your questions, to help you avoid costly mistakes, and then put you on the pathway to a successful retirement. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, at Achieve More Retirement, our goal is to help you live your life on purpose. Please share this video with others.